Heads up, this probably isn't going to be the best review because it's been about a year since I've seen this movie, but I remember quite a lot of my reactions from that viewing of it. So, Terminator Dark Fate. I'm kind of conflicted about this movie because when I first watched it, I didn't think it was grand or anything like that, but I'm like, that was a fun enough ride. It was enjoyable. But then I watched the reviews of people that I like on here, Filmmaster Adam and I believe Chris Stuckman, and after watching those, my opinion of the movie has dropped somewhat. Because, as Filmmaster Adam points out, there's definitely continuity errors that exist between what happened in Terminator 2 and here. And you gotta remember, James Cameron directed, and I think he did something more for those two movies. And this movie, again, ignores every movie that he wasn't involved with, although I'm tempted to say that if Salvation happened, Rise of the Machines happened, especially given how Kate is in both of those movies. But anyways, getting back to this movie, even with James Cameron participating in here, there has to be something going on there. And I felt a little bit of this while I was watching it, but not so much in terms of Arnold's behavior, which I think was Filmmaster Adams' big complaint. I felt that it was more of not doing a good job of explaining the alternate Skynet entity and how that came to be, and then also given how they didn't do the best job of explaining Grace's background. Oh yeah, they explain everything that needs to be explained. How she's not completely robot, not completely human. Sort of what led up to her being with the Resistance and why she volunteered to become partially robots, but I couldn't help but feel like that there was something missing. But what that thing was, I can't tell you. I legitimately can't. It's just something that's in the back of my mind. It's like every time I watch the movie Basic with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, every time they're doing the flashback stories, even though one character is holding back some information, I'm like, there has to be continuity errors here. This just doesn't line up, and it's not because two people are telling different stories. I think it's more than that, but in order to do that, I'd have to be taking notes and rewatching the movie an insane amount of times, and very, very, very rarely am I going to be that kind of person. I just want to sit back and enjoy the product. I don't mind having to think, but to that kind of a bar, I'm not gonna do that. Right. And then also, the bad Terminator in this movie. Like with each of the original trilogy, every time it isn't on screen, I actually end up forgetting about it and just focusing on the dialogue that's going on between our protagonists. And that's good that I'm not thinking about it, because it shows that the filmmakers don't want the movie to just rely on action or chase scenes. They want the dialogue and the chemistry between the characters to also get a grip on you, and it did. I, for the most part, did enjoy all the interactions here that happened between Sarah, Grace, Arnold, and, what's her face? The real main protagonist? Yeah, that's stupid that I don't remember her name. It wasn't complicated, but, yeah, I was enjoying it, but in hindsight, I'm more bothered by the fact that I wasn't thinking about the evil Terminator that much. And, there I believe the filmmakers deliberately put less effort into giving this Terminator a personality, because Arnold they gave a personality. The TX, they just barely put personality elements into the character, and then the T-1000, it did a couple of things, albeit it's not the actual actor that's playing the T-1000 doing most of the personality bits, so it's really just impersonating somebody else. But I don't know, just in hindsight, something about that makes me feel odd. Like I should feel this character a little more than I should. Don't get me wrong, when it was attacking the protagonists, I was nervous the entire time, because that's one pro I could definitely give this movie. I was way more nervous for the protagonists than I was when I watched the second movie. Yeah, but I think part of that had to do with just how epic the scenes were, and the fact that I knew that there was a third one, although when I first watched the original one, I was hella nervous for Reese and Sarah, believe me, I was. Right. So, that's kind of an interesting dynamic, don't you think? And then also, okay, what was I gonna say here? Overall thoughts on this version of Arnold. It's very interesting to view a Terminator that completed its task, because, as the movie alludes to, well, not alludes to, admits, but without saying the actual words out loud, this is the very Terminator that offs John at the beginning of the movie, which totally shocked me. Not the fact that it was the same one, I should have seen that coming, because that's what happened in the third one, but the fact that they did off John, because at first when they killed him, I'm like, okay, yeah, she's having a vision, but then we get that little bit of a voiceover from Linda, and then all of a sudden it shows present day, then I'm like, wait, what? Because everyone was hyping the fact that Ed Furlong or something like that was reprising his role, and then they off his character at the beginning of the movie. Shocking. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, but getting back to Arnold, it's interesting because this franchise has never addressed the question of what happens to the Terminators, or in this case, Terminator, or if they complete their objective. That's another thing that could go all kinds of ways. Do they just shut down? Do they continue on ignoring everybody? Do they actually try to mingle in? And Arnold tried to mingle in here, but then atone to what he did. So that's interesting, though it's a bit of a bummer that we never get much demonstration of that, because there's actually a deleted scene to this movie that I did see where the character Alicia gets into an argument with, I believe, Sarah, and pointing out that she actually does care for Carl, like they try to show that Carl does in those brief moments. So, like with what they were trying to do with Arnold's feelings in the fifth movie, Genesis, the idea is good, but they don't show enough of it to really make it meaningful, if you ask me, and that's unfortunate. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. While I did say that I did enjoy most of the dialogue between all of the protagonists, there definitely were something in there that got to me, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, okay, yeah, there was one line that I did find to be kind of odd, but it's a stupid line. It's where Grace is telling Sarah, if I have to hide her at the bottom of a mine shaft, I'll do that. And I'm like, What's the point in that? If she's at the bottom of a mine shaft, all the evil Terminator has to do to get to her is jump. And when they're at that dam, that's basically what the Terminator does. He just jumps, and then all of a sudden he's right next to all of them. Huh? Right. And then, can't remember if I discussed this because this is take two. The ability of the bad Terminator to split itself into those two different entities. There's just... I don't know, there's just something wrong with that. And, like, also how after it splits, it seems like the gel-forming entity does a lot more than just the physical stature. So then it's like, why bother having that ability? Yeah. And they didn't use it enough. But I think I'm stealing that complaint from Filmmaster Adam. So, just want to point that out. A couple of things to mention that I liked about it, because I think I overlooked it. It was definitely a different feel to the franchise, but it wasn't, oh my god, bad. This film did feel relatable enough, both in comparison to the first two and as its own film. Then the ending of it, yeah, they're trying to leave a little bit of a hook for the following movies, because I'm thinking that the fact that they're showing Grace, young Grace at the end, was a clue that they were going to try and use her in future movies. The fact that Sarah and the what's-her-face chick know what to expect now in more ways than one, it leaves me with a better feeling than the non-continuations for Salvation and Genesis, because there definitely was supposed to be more, even though those films ended every story arc that needed to end. So out of the three, I'd say this one definitely has the best ending of them, both in terms of what's left up for grabs, in terms of story, and then how it concludes the action bits. Because the death of Grace, yeah, that was touching. Yeah, they do kind of rip off the third Terminator bit, but wasn't that big of a deal. And then Arnold's death, given how odds are this will be the last time he appears in the franchise, both because of the fact that this film didn't do so good and how old he is. I legitimately do think that this is his final goodbye. And when he said the For John bit, at first I was kind of like, meh, but the more I think about it, I'm like, whoa. It hit home. It really did. And to allude to where I'm at the beginning, I'm in this weird position with this movie, because out of the three movies that aren't part of the original trilogy, I'm probably always going to just throw Rise of the Machines as part of the original trilogy, just because when I first learned of this franchise, there wasn't any mention about making any future movies. What was I going to say? Okay, I remember now. So, out of the three movies that aren't part of the original trilogy, this is obviously the movie that John Connor appears in the least, because he gets offed in the first 2 minutes of the movie. But ironically, out of these three movies, I think this is the one that is the most about John. Because even though John isn't in the first movie at all, and it's Sarah that needs to be rescued from the Terminator, the movie is still about John, because they're not coming back to kill Sarah. They're coming back to kill Sarah to prevent John being born. The main issue is John, not Sarah. Okay? So that's kind of odd, even though I'm not too sure that I'm going to stick to this next statement, but I think Salvation out of those three movies feels like the most Terminator out of all the movies. Now I know what you're thinking, but wait, this movie basically copied the formula from the first three again. True, but other than that formula, it was a totally different feel to the franchise, so that's kind of odd. The movie that I originally said was least about John Connor. Actually, I think I still will argue that fact that Salvation is less about John than Jenna says. It feels like the most Terminator out of all of them, but I guess that's because there's more Terminators. Yeah, that's a really odd position, isn't it? But given how I don't own any of these movies past the third one, I guess that attests to something. So, as I said at the beginning of this review, it's probably not the best, but had to get this out there to get you up to date on the franchise. I doubt I'll ever talk about Sarah Connor Chronicles because I'm pretty sure that show ends on a cliffhanger, and I do my best to avoid watching TV shows that end on cliffhangers, even though, as I've said multiple times before, I do own a couple. Okay? Overall rating for this movie, I'm gonna be safe and say 3 out of 5. Some of you may think that that's too high, but I need to rewatch like almost every movie in this franchise to get a better viewing of it, and honestly, I don't have that much of a desire to rewatch this movie again. Same thing with Genesis. Only real reason I watch Salvation again is to compare it to other movies. Is it better in this regard, this regard, this regard, that kind of a thing? I don't foresee that happening anytime soon because I actually got rid of my Blu-ray for it. I don't think it's horrible, though. It didn't doom the franchise per se. It's more the writer's fault than anything else, alright? And you're not going to be able to return this franchise to what it was, even if you don't count Terminator 3 or do count it. It doesn't matter, yeah. Because I'm definitely one of those people who will say that he didn't like the third one when he first saw it, but now I look back on it and go, what was I complaining about? And not all of it, even though a good chunk of it has to deal with the fact that those sequels came. Okay, I gotta run because my phone's ringing. Bye!